record. We are recording. So hello, museum families, and welcome to RBCM at Home Kids, a play date through screens across British Columbia and the world. The previous sessions are recorded, and now we're up to, I think it's like 13 or 14 sessions that we've done. So there's lots to look at if you haven't seen them all. And Heidi was actually here early on. So you could see her first visit through our Royal BC Museum YouTube page. So my name's Chris O'Connor, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. The museum and my home is on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations here in Victoria on Vancouver Island. Indigenous people have been continuously on this land since time immemorial. They've worked and work this land. They've cared for and care for the oceans and ocean health. They've innovated and they innovate. Traditional ecological knowledge, science driven by Indigenous folks, in the past and in the present, is the core of the history of this land. So on Monday was World Oceans Day. This week is World Oceans Week. So we celebrate that while continually honoring the important work done by all scientists. Men, women, non-binary folks, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, scientists from all communities that together help us better understand our oceans, our land, and the connections as people, and our commitment to environmental health and human health, and how those two things go together. So before we before we metaphorically jump into the water with Heidi on this Oceans Week, I wanted to go back to last week, where we were visited by Ray, who's a grade 2 kid, and Ray's mom, Genevieve, who's our colleague at the BC Archives. So they showed us how to make zines. It was very fun. And zines are kind of like do-it-yourself magazines. And we had a couple kids send in their zines from last week. So Hartley created a zine called Facts About Cats. And then, and now I'm forgetting, Iris did a zine called The Cute Book and all the cute things. And both of these are incredible zines, and it was really fun to make them last week with Ray and Genevieve. So we're gonna be making art today, and we'd love to see what you come up with, to see the creatures that are deep in the ocean. So please share that with me if you like. So you can send that to me by way of email at coconnor@royalbcmuseum.bc.ca. We'll put that in the chat later as well. So, or you can send it through our socials channels, so at Royal BC Museum or #RBCM Kids. And it's also Oceans Week Victoria, so you can use the hashtag Oceans Week Victoria too. Keep exploring. We have a learning portal online, which is really fun and engaging, and there's lots of things to learn from. So you can just Google Royal BC Museum and Learning Portal, or you could use that address that's there. And then next week, we're actually gonna go behind the scenes with Chelsea Clark, who's a volunteer here at the museum, and look at what happens when animals, specifically vertebrate animals, come into the museum. What happens next? Sometimes that could be a little bit of a gross discussion. We try to think rather than gross, that's interesting, but the way we'll talk about it and the way we'll do it will be age appropriate. So even if that gets a little queasy to think about what happens to animals when they come into the museum, I definitely join us, and it'll be for everyone. And then because this is Oceans Week, I wanted to highlight a couple of scientists that I get really inspired by. So Cassandra Ford, Jason Ward, Karina Newsom, and Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. Jason and Karina both study particularly birds, so things that would fly over the ocean. And Cassandra and Ayana specifically look at fish. So things that you see in the ocean or in other waterways. And their science and their research has been really inspiring to me. And so as we're thinking about the work that's happening to better understand our world, I just want to sort of lift up, we all have our favorite scientists, and I just want to bring forward a couple of my favorite scientists, in addition to Heidi Gartner, who's one of my favorite scientists. So she's here with us today. So let me come back to, so in this format, if you haven't joined us before, you can see, it's a webinar, so you can see me and you can see our guest. Today, that's Heidi. But we can't see you, but we can hear you. We can hear from you if you use the chat function on Zoom, or if you're with us with Facebook Live, you could use the comments section on Facebook Live, and our colleague Wes will send that over to us. And also, again, this is being recorded, so if you need to take a break and then come back to it, you can see the recording later. It'll be up at least by the end of today or the beginning of tomorrow. So without further ado, let's meet our special guest. So we have back Heidi Gartner, the Invertebrate Collections Manager and Researcher here at the Royal BC Museum. If you remember back when she first visited, we found out that invertebrates are animals without backbones, without spines. So we have a spine, so we're not invertebrates, we're vertebrates. But Heidi studies and looks at and explores animals that don't have backbones. So when Heidi was here before, we looked specifically at invertebrates that we might find in a tide pool. But today we're going to go deeper into the ocean, far under the water, to see what we can find. So welcome back, Heidi. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
And is that a good description of the work that you do?
Yeah.
When did you know that you wanted to be a scientist?
I knew when I was quite young, but I lived in Ontario, so I didn't really understand what being a marine biologist was, but I still wanted to do it. So it was an interesting experience. I saw a movie about studying whales and living on ships and getting to do that, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's for me. And then I moved to the west coast of Canada and found out about invertebrates and all the diversity that there is and all the different animals that you can find, and I fell in love with them. So I sort of ended up where I wanted, but it changed a little bit along the way. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then again, last time you were looking at, can you remind us of the animals? There was a limpet and a crab and a barnacle and
sea urchin.
Sea urchin.
And mussel. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
So
so we were looking at things that you could find if you were exploring the beach yourselves, if you found it at a good low tide. But today we're going to take you to somewhere that not many people can go, especially not without any technology like a submersible or a remotely operated vehicle. We're going to go over 2 kilometers deep into the ocean and study some cool habitat down there.
Well,
sound good?
Have you ever been down that far?
I haven't, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I don't think.
Oh yeah, be too claustrophobic. But it's good to find out what's down there and learn from it.
Yes, so I really like the remotely operated vehicles where you can watch. They send down basically a robot that has a camera and has arms that can grab things, and you get to watch from the comfort of either the ship's surface or from even your home if they're live streaming it, which is pretty incredible. Okay. Yeah. So before we start the drawing, because it's very unlikely that any of you have actually been to this place or seen it before, I just wanted to share it with you, a picture and a little video just to give you context before we draw. Can I go ahead, Chris? Or
yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah. Okay. So usually when you go below the ocean surface, if you think about it, the ocean's pretty cold, right? Well, once you drop underneath the surface, just imagine you're sinking down. Pretty quickly light starts to disappear, and so it gets really dark and blue, and then it turns to black and you can hardly see anything. And then if you think about all that water that's on top of you, it's cold, it's dark, it's pressurized, and you get down to the bottom of the ocean floor, which can be up to 2 kilometers or even more deep. And scientists used to think that there wouldn't be much there, down deep in those cold environments, and instead they found this really cool ecosystem that's basically an underwater volcano. And so you're not going to believe me, so I got to show you something so that you have a little bit better understanding of it. So can everyone see my screen yet?
Yep.
Yeah. So believe it or not, the Earth is actually made up of, like, we're basically a bunch of hot magma and hot rock spinning around with this thin crust of the planet's surface on it. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a link that we're going to share with you, but it's here right now, and it just describes kind of what the Earth is like. But essentially, the land is floating around on all these this hot rock and magma. And it's actually formed of these things called tectonic plates. So in this image here that you're seeing, that's the North American plate there. That is a tectonic plate, and these are all floating around on the magma. And where we are in Canada, we actually are on the smallest tectonic plates in the world. And what happens is when tectonic plates move away from each other, imagine they're floating around on that hot magma, water comes down into that cracks, and it creates these hot water volcanoes, basically. And what they've found is there's incredible life down there. So I'll just describe that a bit better here. So what happens is where the tectonic plates are moving apart, the cold water gets pulled down into the crust of the Earth. It gets superheated by that magma, and it picks up things like minerals from the rocks, and it gets really pressurized, and it's getting really hot, and so it gets pushed up and pressurized and shot out, and it gets shot out in this like big black smoker chimney. So this has lots of minerals in it. It's really hot. It's often up to 400 degrees Celsius. And what's really neat is that life has adapted to deal with this such extreme environment. And I'll just show you very quickly. Chris, can you see my video?
Your what?
This video?
Yep.
All right, so this is what these hydrothermal vents look like. You can believe this is 2 kilometers underneath the ocean surface. That shimmering water, that's the really hot water with minerals. And what we're going to be looking at is that life all around it. Look where this fish's tail goes. Ah, hot shimmery water. And then look what's for dinner.
So these are all things that are living near the vents because they prefer that kind of environment, right? Heidi?
Prefer is an interesting word to use.
Oh, they thrive.
Yeah. If I do, sorry, I'm just gonna, am I still sharing my screen?
No.
No, perfect, okay. So they're adapted to this environment. So super hot or hot and cold water, filled with really lots of minerals that are borderline toxic. That would be toxic to people, or people like us, or a lot of animals. They've got all these really cool adaptations to living down there. And usually those adaptations are related to bacteria. And I know the word bacteria is usually associated with really gross stuff, but it's actually a part of the life system down there, and it changed the way we understand life on the planet. So you probably have heard that, photosynthesis, which is like, you know, plants turning light energy into food for all of us using chlorophyll. That's what they used to think the building blocks of the world were, where it was photosynthesis. But now they also know that life can exist on our planet with chemosynthesis. So the bacteria take those metals, and instead of using the sun's energy, they use the metal energy, and they use that to produce carbon for the rest of us, or the animals that are living down there. So really weird, very cool environment, and we're going to dry some of the animals that live in there. So here is my board. This is about as close as I can get. If you were with me with the tide pools, we're actually going to start with a very similar animal to what we had on the first day, but it's got a bit different of an adaptation. So the shape you want to start with is kind of like a long, pointy kind of oval. So this is with a line down the middle of it. Can everyone see that? That is called a bivalve. It's a mussel. And so you just want to do kind of a pointy oval with a line down the middle of it. If you have black, that's great. If you have a brown or yellow, if you want to use those colors, those are the colors that they'd be at the deep sea environment level as well. And then we're going to take a second one and we're going to draw it, but just to describe to you, I'm going to do it slightly open. So those two valves, I'm going to make a V instead. And what mussels are is they have siphons, so they're filter feeders. So they take water in through one hole and they shoot it out the other one. But what's really neat about deep sea mussels is they have adapted to have their body so that they have this symbiotic bacteria living in them. And what this bacteria does is it takes all the sulfide from the water and it lives on the gills of the mussel, and it provides them with food. So they don't really have to filter feed much. They can filter feed, but they don't really need to. So the ones that are at deep sea are a bit more yellow. So if you want to color it in, they're kind of a yellowish brown. You can do that. All right. So those are mussels, but they're adapted for this environment. Next up, do you remember seeing those really long white tubes? And then they focused in and there was all sorts of things crawling on the white tubes. Well, one of the things crawling on the white tubes was actually something called a scale worm. It's a type of worm that has all these circular protective plates on the back of it. So for our shape for a scale worm, you're going to do an oval again. Here. Like this. And then we're just going to do a series of these overlapping plates. They kind of are overlapping and protecting the animal. And they've got these tentacles that we saw kind of at the front. I can show the video again at the end to show these after we've drawn them, and then you'll better understand what they were. And then you could also kind of see their little walking legs called parapody on the side. So this is another animal that you can sometimes see up in the intertidal zone, but they're different in the sense that they won't be the exact same species. They do belong to the same family. But what they're adapted to down here is these are they're the type of animals that will eat just about anything. Just about. So they're eating down there, they're eating that bacteria. They're eating their bacteria mats around these hot vents. Their body's adapted to being in so much of the those metals that are in the water. So that's why they kind of had that pinkish purpley color that we had there. So I drew mine with like a purpley color. You could use pink or something like that. And they also, those tube worms that they were crawling on, they'll sometimes nibble on them. So these are kind of predators that are just going to eat pretty much anything.
Heidi, what is this called again? This one called again?
This one is called a scale worm. So these little circles you can think of are like scales. They're also called elytra.
And the first one was called, you said a bivalve, but did it have a particular?
Oh, a mussel. So that's
it's a mussel, right?
Mussel.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
How's my volume? Is it okay?
Yeah, all's good.
Okay. All right, so the next thing that we saw in the videos that we just talked about is those long white tubes. And often what you saw at the end of the long white tubes were bright red. So this is a very cool animal called a hydrothermal vent worm. These are what cued scientists off to the fact that life was being based off of these bacteria and this chemosynthesis, because this is an animal that actually doesn't have a mouth or a butt or any sort of digestive system. It relies entirely on the bacteria, which is very crazy. So what you're going to draw for this is
Sorry,
really
Heidi.
long.
All right, Heidi, can I just jump in for a second? What is the color for the second one before we go on to the third one? Does
I
it have?
went for like a purple or a pink or a red would be good, because what they have in their bodies to deal with so much of those heavy metals is a lot of hemoglobin, and that helps deal with metals and water.
Great,
So it
thank you.
kind of gives it more of like a pink or purple color, just the way if you think about your blood's red.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so we're going to do the hydrothermal vent tube worms. So first off, just do a nice and long tube, kind of like this. And it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. These are animals. They've got curves and kinks to them. They go with the flow, but they are pretty long. And often in the video, we saw them with lots of them around. So they were kind of clusters of them. These are animals that cannot move. So these tubes are cemented to the substrate, the chimneys and the ground that's all around. And at the top of the tubes, the top of the worm sticks out. So what they had was this, we're going to go kind of with a circle. It had a bit of a circle up there. So these two. And then they had bright red frills all around on this. So if you're going to draw this, I'd go with red if you have red. So just keep doing that on this headpiece. And what this happens is those are really red because that hemoglobin we're talking about. So they pick up oxygen, carbon dioxide, and sulfur from the water, and they pass it along to bacteria that's living in their main body part. So if we didn't have, or if you could see through this white tube, you'd see a more worm-like body down in under here. And that's where all that bacteria is living. And it takes that and it produces carbon and sugars and food for this animal. And this white tube on the outside provides protection for the worm. So the worm can actually, if it's disturbed, so if this little scale worm came across, it would go down into its tube, and the circular thing I've drawn at the top would kind of like plug the top so that predators couldn't get in. So we have a hydrothermal vent tube worm, a scale worm, and a mussel over here. Hopefully everyone's doing all right. We're going to do one last animal before we cut them out. And this one is a coral. So corals you've probably heard of as down in the tropics. They form coral reefs that are incredible habitat for all sorts of animals and really increase the biodiversity of an area. Well, in Canada, we actually do have corals, but they don't form coral reefs. They form more like branching structures. And they don't have the symbiotic algae. So if you think about this, we're over 2 kilometers down at the bottom of the ocean. We don't need any symbiotic algae that's using light energy to produce food. Instead, what you were seeing in the videos were almost like orange trees. So that's what I'm going to do with. I'm going to go with like an orange. If you have orange or pink or white even or black, you can use those colors if you want to. And I'm going to make a stem. And then from here, just think of a super branchy tree. So I'm just going to make a few big branches, and then I'm going to put little branches off it. You can take as much time as you'd like to make it branchy. I'm not going to fill mine in right now. So for example, all of this should be red. And these should have all your branches filled in. But what I'm going to show you is on each of these branches, if you were going to zoom in, you don't have to draw this part, this is just for information. What you would see is a bunch of tiny little polyps. They've got like arms, again, almost like a tree. Okay, this is going to look horrible because I'm, anyway, lots of branches thing. And those little individuals pluck food from the water. So things like plankton or debris that's going around. So those are our 4 animals. We've got branching corals, we've got our scale worm, our mussels, and our tube worms. Now what I want you to do is to cut them out. When I say cut them out, please don't worry about, you know, following precise lines. We're just going to be pasting these on the environment. So literally just kind of a rough outline is fine, and just kind of follow around. Any big questions while you're cutting? Please let me know.
I think we're okay for right now.
All right, so let's go back to this crazy deep sea environment. We have underwater hot water springs, geysers, or volcanoes, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to put one over here. So basically just make almost like a big chimney or a big rocket up to the top. I'm going to leave it open, and I'm going to come down. Then we're going to hit kind of more common sea floor. And then let's go up and do another one. But this is one that's no longer erupting. So I'm just going to draw it off as flat at the top. So that does happen sometimes if you think about where the cracks in the Earth's crust would be when things are moving apart. They might not always stay in the same spot. The pressure might change and a new volcano might shoot up a little bit further along. But even these ones are cool to study because they've left these chimneys from when they were erupting. So this one's our erupting, our shimmery water that's full of metal. It's over 300 degrees Celsius, metals, super hot. And then as you slowly move away from there, you get back to your really cold ambient sea temperature, which is only about 4 degrees Celsius, which is really cold. Sometimes what happens close by to these big chimneys is a little bit of water gets not quite as hot, and it's called diffuse flow. So it won't be the big chimney, which is crazy smoking. It's kind of got some diffuse flow. And this is usually more about 10 to 40 degrees Celsius here. All right, so let's take our animals. So first off, I'm going to grab my hydrothermal vent worms. Let's all think about where we saw them in the videos and where you think they'd be. I saw them a lot right near these chimney structures. So these worms have been adapted to deal with the hot temperature in the metals. First by these red plumes to pull the metals and things out of the water they need. These tubes actually help protect them from the heat, and they can pull down in and hide from predators and that sort of thing. And then when we zoomed in on the video, the next animal I'm going to put on is the scale worms. Whoop. So we already talked about this a little bit, but where would the scale worms be? Well, if there's bacteria growing along and around in this super hot environment, they'll be along grazing and eating. But they actually like the forest kind of structural habitat that's provided by these long tubes. It provides a good spot for them to hide and to have homes and to not be spotted by predators. Plus, they really like nibbling on these red branchial plumes. They love eating them. So in the video, if we watch it again, if we have time at the end, you'll actually see when these are crawling around on them, they retreat into their tubes. So there's our scale worm. Next up, let's think about this diffuse flow. Who else did we say had symbiotic bacteria in them? So not only can they filter out food, but they have a bacteria living within them. Down here, the mussels. So what they've found with these mussels, researchers, is that they can filter a little bit of food out when they pull the water in and shoot it out, but mostly they're relying on the bacteria. So if this diffuse flow changes, or if they try transplanting these mussels somewhere else, they can't actually live without this chemosynthetic relationship. They just can't process and do enough food on their own. So much of their body has been changed to this adaptation that they can't feed anymore the normal way that mussels do. Now our last
Heidi, I'm just jumping in just for a second. So it is 11:30. So we're just we'll finishing up, but so feel free to stay with us for the next couple minutes. But if anyone needs to go, you're welcome to go.
Okay, last animal is our coral. So when these smokers are no longer happening, they leave behind these chimney structures. And if you think about the big open ocean being pretty flat, this provides this extra structural habitat. And just like, you know, wind can pick up around a mountain, ocean currents can, and it helps bring up food. So these corals like to live on these chimneys. And corals are really cool animals that can be long-lived, help increase the biodiversity of an area, and that sort of thing. So that's the basics of it. If anyone would like to watch the video again or ask me any questions, please feel free.
I think what we'll do, I'll just come back in. Hi, Heidi. So I think what we'll do is we'll officially end, but then whoever's staying on can continue, and then we can watch the video as well. But I wanted to just thank you, Heidi, because it's so fascinating what lives both in what we could see in the tide pool, but then deeper down in the ocean, this incredible environment by the vents that's just is a crazy place. And it seems like it's a place where we're constantly learning what's happening. So one of the questions that was asked is, can these animals resist magma? So what is the relationship between the animals and the magma? That was asked by Cora.
So they don't actually end up touching the magma. The magma doesn't usually reach all the way to the surface. So it's more just how the magma superheats the water. And as it superheats the water, it's able to pick up all these minerals and make that big black smoky chimney that has all the minerals in the superheated water. So that's what they interact with. They don't often actually ever encounter magma.
Right.
It's so cold and stuff down there that when magma does start to seep near the surface, it just makes this sort of structure. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for joining us for the second time here at RBCM at Home, kids. And so we'll say goodbye to Facebook Live. I'll stop the live stream.
Well, I'll just say for those who don't want to stay for the video, if you Google Endeavour Hydrothermal Vents, it's on DFO's YouTube channel. So you can find that video again if you would like. So Endeavour Hydrothermal Vents. Great.
And then I'll stop the recording as well for Zoom.